patience. In a world that's all about speed, it really feels like a lost art, doesn't it? But what if we've been looking at it completely the wrong way? Today, we're going to dive into what patience really means using one of the most epic stories of waiting ever told as our roadmap.
I mean, just think about it for a second. We live in a world of right now. If a website takes more than a couple of seconds to load, we're annoyed. If we don't get a text back in 5 minutes, we start to worry. This whole culture of instant gratification has made the simple act of waiting feel, well, almost painful. But what if waiting is actually a superpower?
To really get a handle on this, we're going to rewind way back to the ancient story of Noah. Now, you probably know the gist of it, right? A man, a gigantic boat, a world-changing flood. But if you look closer, this story is really the ultimate masterclass in 3 very different and very powerful kinds of patience.
So let's start with the first one. And this one, well, it's probably the most relatable for all of us. It's the patience to endure what other people think. I mean, it's one thing to believe in what you're doing, but it is a whole different ballgame to keep doing it when everyone around you thinks you're completely nuts.
Okay, so just try to picture this. Noah gets this huge assignment from God, but the instructions he's given are, to put it lightly, pretty weird. He's on dry land, nowhere near an ocean. And get this, in his time, the idea that rain could fall from the sky and cover the entire earth, that was a completely foreign concept. He was being asked to do something that made 0 sense to anyone.
So what do you think happened? He got mocked, of course. You can just imagine people walking by, day after day, seeing this massive boat being built in the middle of a field and just laughing at him. They called him crazy. For decades, he had to put up with this constant stream of ridicule, and all the while, he just kept his head down and kept working. That required a very specific kind of patience with all those outside voices. And this quote right here, it just perfectly captures the kind of mindset he must have had. See, Noah's focus wasn't on what his neighbors were saying. His focus was on the voice that gave him the mission in the first place. He had to build this kind of mental shield of faith and purpose to deflect all that negativity. The key takeaway here is that his patience wasn't about ignoring the criticism, but about choosing which voice mattered more.
All right, let's move on to the second type of patience. This one is all about the process itself. It's about enduring the long, slow, often really difficult work of building something, especially when you have no idea when or if you'll ever be done.
120 years. Just let that number sink in for a minute. That's roughly how long Noah spent building the ark. This wasn't a weekend project. This was a multi-generational mission. It was literally his life's work. A daily grind with no pats on the back, no immediate results, and no sign that any of it was going to pay off.
And what's so wild is when you break it down like this. The first 30 years were just getting the supplies. For 60 years, that's 2 full generations, he was just building the main frame. The final decades were spent on the details. Each one of those stages was a massive project in itself, requiring this relentless day-in and day-out commitment.
And just to give you a sense of scale here, the Ark was big enough to hold the equivalent of 520 modern shipping containers. And remember, he wasn't working with cranes or power tools. This was all done by hand. The sheer amount of physical work stretched out over a century, it's just mind-boggling.
That's why this image of a tiny sapling is such a perfect metaphor. Anything truly great, whether it's building a company, learning a new skill, or raising a family, it just doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes showing up every day, nurturing it, and having the patience to wait for that slow, sometimes invisible growth.
And that brings us to the third kind of patience, which might just be the most difficult one of all. It's the patience to act on faith, even when you don't have all the answers. It's about moving forward without a complete blueprint of the why or the how.
Now, it's so important to remember this. Noah was not a shipbuilder. He wasn't an engineer. He was a farmer. He probably didn't have a clue about the complex physics of what he was building. His job wasn't to understand every last detail. His job was to trust the instructions he was given and just get to work.
And this idea, well, it's a cornerstone of so many spiritual traditions. It's this radical kind of trust, this belief that there's a wisdom out there that's bigger than our own limited point of view. It's having the patience to keep going even when our logical minds are screaming with questions.
So ultimately, this type of patience shows us something really profound. Belief isn't just a feeling or an idea in your head, it's an action. Noah's faith wasn't just in his thoughts, it was in his hands, in the swing of his hammer, in every single plank of wood he put in place. He was literally building his belief.
Now, this whole framework for patience isn't just some old story from thousands of years ago. You can see these exact same principles in the life of one of the most inspiring figures in modern history, Nelson Mandela.
For fighting against the injustice of racial segregation in South Africa, Mandela was put in prison for 27 years. A huge chunk of that time was spent right here, on Robben Island. This tiny cell, this was his whole world. For almost 3 decades, he had to patiently hold on to a vision for his country that, from that cell, must have seemed completely impossible.
That number, that wasn't his name. It was his prisoner number. It was an attempt to strip him of who he was. And yet, through that impossibly long wait for justice, he turned his prison into a university, teaching himself and others, refusing to let his spirit be crushed.
And these words from Mandela just capture it all perfectly. He really lived out all 3 kinds of patience we've been talking about. Patience in the face of a world system that called him a criminal, patience through the unbelievably long process of being imprisoned, and patience without knowing when or even if freedom would ever come.
So what can we learn from these incredible stories of endurance? I think the biggest lesson from both Noah and Mandela is that we need to completely redefine what it means to be patient.
And this is the absolute key. We usually think of patience as being passive, right? Like you're just sitting around, doing nothing, waiting for something to happen. But that's not what these stories show us at all.
Real patience is an active force. It's Noah picking up his tools every single day. It's Mandela reading a book in his cell. It is the deep, gut-level faith that the small things you do day in and day out are building towards something better, even if you can't see it yet. Patience is work.
So, I'll leave you with this question to think about. What impossible goal in your life doesn't actually need a miracle, but just needs a little more time and a lot more active, relentless patience?